Oh, Felix here again, one of Herod's wonderful mercenaries, but actually, if you remember, actually a Roman auxiliary, working, I suppose, for Herod, but actually under the command of the Emperor of Rome. Last time I told you about us meeting on a trip down to Jericho when we were escorting a camel train, the camel drover Eli, the stories he told us. The one about Moses, who'd led the people of Israel out of Egypt to the promised land, but actually hadn't got there. Not got there himself, no. And when we asked him where Moses' grave was, he told us there hadn't been a grave. He'd actually been taken up by their God. Oh yeah, their God. They've got one God. Just can't understand a country, a nation that only has one God. I mean, we have gods everywhere. You'd think you'd want gods everywhere, wouldn't you? But, well, they obviously don't. They do with one. But it was a few days afterwards, and we were still travelling down to Jericho, when we came across Eli again. To tell you the truth, it had been a couple of really hard days. We had a little raid by some bandits, and we chased them off. And we were on the lookout all the time after that. It was a very, very bad road, the road down to Jericho. Road of Blood it was nicknamed for a very good reason. And to tell you the truth, we actually looked Eli out. We went round the camps at night, from fire to fire, because we were ready for a sit down. We were off duty, some of our companions were on duty, and we just wanted to hear one of Eli's stories because he was a great storyteller. We eventually found him with another group of Jewish camel drivers, and they all looked at us rather suspiciously. Well, I suppose they would. Here were some of Herod's soldiers coming round specifically looking for somebody and ending up at their campfire. But Eli waved. "Oh, hello," he said. "Why, you've had some problems, haven't you, the last couple of days? Saw you shooting off into the rocks after those bandits." But we sat down round the fire. "Eli," I asked him, "tell us another one of your stories. We're really ready to hear one of your stories. We're just tired, and one of your stories will do us good." "Well," he said, "I told you about Moses. What do you want to hear about now?" "Well," one of my companions said, "we've heard a lot about these prophets that you have. Now, we have a lot of prophetesses, but not prophets in particular. Can you tell us a story about prophets?" "Oh, yes," said Eli. "Well, the greatest prophet, but I always think," said Eli, "was Isaiah. Isaiah, when we were all in exile in Babylon, told us some fantastic stories about what God was going to do and how God was going to protect us and bring us back here. And, well, he also told us about one day God was going to send a Messiah." "What's a Messiah?" I asked. "A Messiah, well, the Messiah, I suppose, is going to be the one person from God who is going to change the world forever." "Oh," they all said, "sort of a revolutionary." "Well, I suppose Isaiah did mean to be sort of revolutionary," said Eli, but it was about bringing peace and love for each other and a time for looking after each other and not going to war so much." "Puh!" said one of my friends. "But we don't hear about Isaiah. He sounds a bit, well, no. You told us about, your God drowning the Egyptians. Have you got a story like that? We like a good story with a bit of action." Eli shrugged his shoulders. "Don't you want to hear about God's great promise?" "No," we all said, "no. We want to hear something like your God drowning Egyptians." "All right," said Eli, and sat back. He looked at his companions. "Who should we go for?" One of them said, "Oh, Elijah. Elijah's a good one for these, any rate." "Oh," we said, "Elijah? That's interesting. And what's all this about then?" Eli said, "A long, long time ago, a long time ago indeed, we had a king called Ahab. Now, Ahab had married somebody who wasn't a Jew. She was from the coast. And she got all sorts of different gods. And before he could get any further, we said, oh, well, that's a bit better than just one. No, hang on. He said, hang on. Let me tell the story. Oh, all right, he said. All sorts of gods, Baals and Asherahs. Well, Ahab the king decided that he wanted to follow these gods. And actually, he built a temple down in Samaria, a big temple to this Baal god. In fact, there were lots of little Baals, but the main one he built a temple to. And also he went up onto the high mountains and the high grounds and he set up poles. What did he set up poles for? One of us said. Oh, well, that was Asherah poles, because their god, Asherah, was actually worshipped on mountaintops. Oh, right. Oh, well, that made sense. For us coming from up on the Alps, that made a lot of sense. I mean, that's where the gods were, up in the clouds, of course. So we said, what happened next? Well, said Eli. You call me Eli. Yes, we said. Well, my friends actually got me to tell this story because actually my name is Elijah and Eli is short for Elijah. Well, what's that got to do? Oh, yes. I said, yeah, it's about the prophet Elijah. Oh, you're named after him, are you? Well, probably, said Eli, but that's why I like to call myself Eli because, well, you'll find out in the story. God, he said, our God, sent the prophet Elijah to go to Ahab's court. And he was pretty brave. And also, he was pretty forthright. Oh, we like that straight away. Brave and forthright. This was a good story. He went into Ahab's court and actually said, I've been sent by God. You've done wrong. We all looked at each other. Somebody coming to tell a king, emperor, anybody like that, he's done wrong. Well, said Eli. King Ahab looked at Elijah and said, what do you mean I've done wrong? Well, you've set up these temples. You've built a big temple to Baal. You've made lots of little ones. You've set up the Asherah poles up on the mountains. You've turned your back on God. And God's going to punish you for that. God's going to send a drought. And until you take down all these poles, get rid of all these Baals, all these temples, that's it. There's going to be a drought. That's it. What's happened next, we said. Well, Elijah went out. Didn't the king do anything? Well, Elijah was warned by God, get out of here fast. So he did. And he went out into the desert. Funny place to go into a desert if there's going to be a drought, we said. Oh, no. God told him exactly where to go. A little valley, far, far away. There was a stream there, and he'd be all right. And as it happened, he was. And ravens fed him. Ravens fed him, he said. Yeah, ravens fed him. God sent ravens, and they fed him, said Eli. And I must not call him Elijah because last time I called him Elijah, he gave me a really dirty look. You must remember Eli. So what happened next, we said? Well, the drought came. And it was really bad throughout the whole of the land. And then God said to Elijah, go back and see Ahab. Tell him there's a way out of this. Now Elijah wasn't very sure, said Eli. He wasn't very sure at all, but he did what God had asked him to, and he went back. And when he got back, he said, why are you worshipping all these different gods and turned your back on God? Well, there were lots of priests of Baal and lots of priests of Asherah there, and they all said, tell him, King, tell him, King Ahab. And Ahab said, well, obviously, it's because these gods are greater. And all these other priests said, yes, he is. Yes, they are. Yeah, Baal is greater. Baal is much greater than your God, the God you worship. Much better. Is that right? Said he. Is that right? Do you know, I actually called Elijah Eli. I just get so mixed up with these people. They've got strange names and some of them sound the same, like Matthew and Matthias, Marion and Miriam. Well, here we go again. Well, Elijah said, we'll have a competition. If you think that your God and your gods are greater than God himself, well then, let's meet. And he told them a certain place where they had to meet. And they went. And when they got there, Elijah said, what you got to do, if your God is so great, build an altar. On the altar, put a slain bull. Build a fire around it, put logs underneath it, anything that will make it burn. It's for a sacrifice to your God. Well, priests were there. 400 priests of Baal, 300 priests of the others, Asherah and the rest. They built this huge altar, put the wood on, they put the bull on, they put the wood round the bull. Right, said one of them. What do we do now? Light the fire? Oh, no, said Elijah. No, your God will light the fire. Pray to your God, he'll light the fire for you. If he's that good, he'll light the fire. Eli got a big smile on his face. Ooh, I thought this is going to be interesting. A contest between gods. That's the sort of story we really like to hear about. Well, said Eli, all these hundreds of priests walked round and round and round the altar, praying and shouting and yelling and blowing trumpets and making a huge row, the usual thing they did in worship. But nothing happened. They went round and round till they were tired and their voices were going and nothing happened. Right, said Elijah. Right, now. And he turned to some of the people. Get some water. I want you to soak everything. The bull, the wood, everything. But first, I am going to build a special altar for you to do it on. He got 12 huge stones. One, said Eli, one for each of the tribes of Israel. Built an altar, took the wood, put the wood on, put the bull on. And then Elijah prayed to God. What about the water? I said. Oh, well, yes, the water being put on. In fact, they've been put on 3 times. It was absolutely soaked. I thought you gathered that when you said you were going to soak it. Were they going to soak it? So what happened? Fire from heaven. Said, fire from heaven. Whoa, that's better. Everything burnt up. Everything, Eli said. And Elijah stood there and said, our God has spoken. The people of Israel, King Ahab, and all the others who'd been there, well, they were very, very shocked and very, very scared, actually. In fact, the people of Israel who were being watching on here were so scared that they decided they had to get rid of the other priests. And they killed them all. Whoa, he said, this is a really good story. So what happened next? That was it. Well, not really. Because remember, said Eli, remember I told you that Ahab had married this Jezebel? Well, she got a lot of power and, well, I suppose in your terms, she put a price on Elijah's head and he had to run away again. Doesn't have much luck, does he? You would have thought, he said, you would have thought that after your God had done what your God had done, that actually Elijah was going to be okay. Well, he was okay, said he. But you've just said he had to run away. Oh yes, but he was okay, because God was with him. He went to hide in a cave. He went to hide in a cave. And then one day he got this feeling that God was very close, but he didn't know where. It was behind him. Was he in the cave? There was a huge thunderstorm, said Eli. Oh, well, yeah, got to be in the thunderstorm. Well, Elijah looked, said Eli, and no, God wasn't there. Winds, everything, rows, huge sounds. And Elijah looked, and God wasn't there. Well, that's a funny sort of God, we thought. Sort of thing a God would come in. Ah, said Eli, you're talking about a God. I'm talking about God. God. Not a God. God. Oh, this is one God, of course, we thought. So what happened? I said. What happened? Well, said Eli, nothing. Or at least it was like nothing, because all of a sudden there was absolute stillness and absolute silence. And then Elijah went out of the cave, said he. Guess what? God was there, in the peace and the calm and the silence. Is that it? I said. Yeah, that's it, said Eli. Elijah became a great prophet. He travelled around, he trained other people, one called Elisha. Hang on a minute. Elijah and Elisha, I said. It's not one of these mix-up names again, is it? You know, like you, Elijah, Eli, etc. Mary, Mariam, Miriam, whatever. Joshua and Jeshua. It's not the same person under a... No. I know what you think about names. I've heard it all before from more of your companions than I can even tell you. No, this was Elisha, and he trained him, and Elisha became a great prophet too. So what's happened to Elijah then? Eli pulled a face. You're not going to like this, he said. Why aren't we going to like it? He said. You remember the end of the Moses story I told you? Oh, yeah. Moses went up to God, and there was no grave at all. Yeah, said Eli. What do you mean? We said. Oh, you're joking. Oh, no. You mean Elijah went up to God and there's no grave? Yeah. In a fiery chariot. Yeah, right, we said. Well, believe it or not, there's no grave. He went to God, just like Moses did. We looked at him. It's a great story, I said to him. A great story. But it's a daft ending. Well, you might think it's daft, said Eli. We don't. It means something very, very special. Because if there's no grave, what does that actually mean? He looked at his companions. He looked at each other. And nobody said a word. He carried on down to Jericho. Bit sad, actually. A month later, we heard that he'd had a really bad accident at Eli. Great young bloke. Apparently they'd been going up a very steep mountain pass. One of the donkeys had bolted or fallen or slipped or something. He was still holding on to the halter, rolled back down the hill, smashed his legs in or something like that. All he could do eventually was to hobble around with a stick. I understand he got a job as a shepherd up in Bethlehem where he came from, up on the hills there. He'd be useful as a guard. Yeah, with that sling, I mean, fantastic, but poor lad, so young, so much potential. I mean, his whole idea of having a camel and donkey droving business had gone out the window. Really sad. I really liked his stories. Really liked them a lot.